In this episode of the Campcast, we have a conversation with good friend YutyTyrant about Chaos Theory Season 3. So if you want to hear what we have to talk about, stick around until after the intro. Hello and welcome to the Cretaceous Campcast. I'm Cretaceous Dave, and this is a podcast all about Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous and Jurassic World Chaos Theory. In this episode of the Campcast, I had the pleasure of sitting down and chatting with good friend Kia, who you may know as YutyTyrant from social media. I've known him for years. He's a great guy, and he contributes to the Campcast social media account. So thank you so much, Kia, for doing that. We took about an hour of time. We chatted about Chaos Theory Season 3. It was a lot of fun. We could have talked longer, but I had to get back to work. You may notice I'm holding a microphone. That is my, what I call mobile studio. I was recording from in my car. And apologies if there's some echoing or background noise while I'm talking. It was technical issues. I tried to clean it up as much as I could, but hopefully it doesn't interfere too much with this episode. So take a listen at everything we had to talk about. All right, so let's get this started since I only have maybe an hour or so, and we'll see how we go because we tend to go on and on when we talk about stuff. So we're here to chat Chaos Theory Season 3. So full disclosure, I watched it not as soon as it came out, but over the course of that week, and I watched a couple episodes at a time. I wasn't as thoroughly invested in it as I was the other seasons, even though I really enjoyed it. So it's not as fresh in my memory as some other stuff, but we'll maybe I'll let you take the driver's seat and we can have some discussion about it.
I also like to when I watch this sort of stuff because it drops all in one piece. I also like to take my time with it and sort of watch it couple of episodes at a time, take everything in, because I don't want it to be over with. So I like taking my time, and I definitely did that with season 3 as well. I think it took me like 2 days to watch the whole thing, and I may need to rewatch the entire show, but I'm pretty sure it's my favorite season. Which it's hard to pick because I think the show as a whole is very strong, but I'm like 60% sure season 3 is my favorite season.
Yeah, I agree. I have to watch them all again. Season 1 is just like really, really good because we didn't know what to expect, and I think it exceeded everybody's expectations with 1. But yes, similar thing with 3. Like every season of both shows so far, I got up at 3:00 in the morning and I just binged through and watched every episode straight through. And season 3 was the first time. I don't even think I watched anything on that Thursday, or maybe it was the Thursday night. So I kind of stayed off the internet for a couple days because I'm like, oh, all these people are gonna watch it all at once, and I'm gonna get spoiled with things. So I watched like 2 or 3 episodes a day. So it took me like 3 days, I think, to get through it. But it did feel better watching it that way, like I was watching a regular TV show. Like, there's no way I'd be able to spread like 1 episode a week out. That would just be crazy. But
spoiled.
Yeah, it would take 2 months to watch the whole thing. So definitely would not be able to do that. But yeah, I really liked it. It was a very strong season. I was a little bit surprised they jumped right in to the Malta crossover with Dominion. Like I knew they were probably headed there, but I didn't think we would get, partway through the season. Like this is happening during the movie. I still thought we were a little bit a ways away from the movie, but nope, we ended up in the movie. So what'd you think about, we're gonna jump all over the place as things come to my head, so apologies in advance for that. But yeah, what did you think about this crossover into the movie?
I'm really glad they sort of dedicated essentially an entire season to basically fleshing out Malta stuff. We get the culmination of everything is as you said, happening at the same time as the stuff we see in the movie. And the reason I like it is because Malta is probably the closest Dominion comes to sort of delivering on its premise. So I like that aspect about it, but it kind of feels like a pit stop. It feels like a little bit of a side quest. It feels a little removed from what the movie story is actually about. So I'm really glad here in this show we get to basically take center stage, and we get to find all sorts of stuff about how the black market is run, how connected everything is to biosin, how directly involved biosin is with the black market stuff. This ties into season 2 a little bit more, but seeing more of Soyona Santos, which she was such an interesting character in the movie, but she was also barely in the movie. So this is kind of like, everyone has said this, so this is not the most original take, but it's kind of like doing the Clone Wars thing of fleshing out the world that we see in the movies and adding a lot of extra, detail and background, and just making it all make a lot more sense. And I feel like for a lot of us, we're now kind of we understand what the movie was trying to do a lot better. As seeing this show, especially since season 3, especially because it's so close to Dominion, because it's happening alongside Dominion, is basically what I think most of us wanted from Dominion. So it's really nice to sort of get the whole picture about everything that's going on. With we'll talk about biosin stuff later, but I really love how sort of gradually they integrate biosin, they introduce biosin into the story, and that's gonna become relevant next season in season 4 when we go to Biosin Valley itself. But in terms of really fleshing out the stuff that we see in the movies, I think this show is doing a phenomenal job, and I'm definitely appreciating what the movie was doing a lot more than when the movie first came out.
Yeah, I agree. People that know me over the last couple of years know, as cool as the Malta sequence is, I always felt like it didn't belong in Dominion. It's like so different from everything else, and it seemed unnecessary. It was like, we're just stopping here to show a bunch of cool stuff with dinosaurs, and then we're going back to the
Yeah,
story
you
we
have
need
to
to go
in
to.
an urban area because people want to see it, but we're in actuality we're doing this other story.
Yeah,
So
so I liked where Chaos Theory went with that. That, like you said, it fleshed it out a lot more. It gave you an idea of, what's happening that's tying the rest of the movie together. What I would really like to see, and maybe someone will do it after season 4, because people did it with Star Wars Episode 3, that I would like to see not the Camp Cretaceous, the Chaos Theory cuts that mix with the movie, intertwined in with the movie, and make like a super duper extended cut. So someone did that with Star Wars Episode 3 that integrates the Clone Wars into it for the relevant parts, and the movie ends up being like 6 hours long or something ridiculous like that. But I think it would be really cool if someone took that project on and splice the scenes from the shows in there. So
I think like
I
there
don't
was
know.
YouTube videos of someone doing things like going all the way back to the first Jurassic World movie, doing like here's because they do this scene with the helicopter shooting at the Indominus Rex, and there's this video that kind of integrates the scene from the show and also the scene from the movie together, kind of like what you're saying, but it's only a short video of just that one scene, so it's definitely possible.
Yeah, it would just take somebody a lot of time. They would need to really be dedicated and passionate about this project. And as much as I would like to see it, I just do not have the time to do something like that. So it would be really cool, though. So if anyone is watching or listening now, or when this gets published as a podcast episode, hey, if you're looking for a cool project after season 4 is over, splice these episodes together into Dominion and let's see what you can come up with.
The Jurassic cut of Jurassic World Dominion.
Yeah, the chaotic cut, we can call it.
Yeah.
The chaotic cut. All right, so we talked about Malta a little bit. I'm gonna jump to probably what you're gonna want to talk about the most, and what thoughts on the Pyroraptor from the second it was introduced through everything it did throughout the season.
So a little bit of backstory. Back when we found out about the show, about the show existing at all, which is like the one thing I want more than anything else, is for them to feature the Pyroraptor specifically, so Darius could encounter a feathered dinosaur. And this the reason I wanted it was because in the actual movie they didn't do the thing that I really think sort of writes itself, which is what to have Dr. Grant encounter the Pyroraptor. The even the word raptor means bird of prey guy meets the bird of prey raptor. I think that's kind of obvious thing to connect. But also, as much as I have always loved the Pyroraptor, like since the very first time I saw it in the trailers for Dominion, I was like, feathered raptor. I love feathered raptor. Anyone who knows me knows I love feathered dinosaurs. So I was really excited to see it. But the scene of it in the movie is just it's a relatively short scene. It kind of happens, and then it just disappears from the story. It doesn't really. The way that they handle the Pyroraptor here is like, I remember I think it was Chris Pugh, Chris likes dinos, who first said it, that the way they introduced the Pyroraptor in this show, and they kind of make the appearance of a feathered raptor, a feathered dinosaur, feel impactful. It's like this is a new thing that up to this point just hasn't existed in this universe. So just the way they introduce it in episode 2, where it attacks the car with Darius and Kenji, and you barely see it, and then at the end of that episode, they find a singular feather. That is the perfect way to introduce something like this, and the way they keep building it up across different episodes, especially like in episode 3, where it attacks the that one guy who football, and the way they characterize it as this intelligent hunter that stalks its prey. It feels very it gives the energy of like a wild animal. If the Atrociraptors are bulldogs, Pyroraptor feels like a coyote or something like that. It's always like stalking. It's always trying to go after maybe like the easiest prey. They characterize it so well. They introduce it so well. The first time we see it in Fire in the Piazza, when it sort of emerges out of the shadow, that is such a beautiful reveal. And they just do so much cool stuff with it. Like there's the fight with the Atrociraptors as well, where once again I have to comment on just how well animated it is, because the personification of the Pyroraptor in that scene, it gives the vibe of I can defend myself really well, and that entire sequence is really cool. But my favorite scene with the Pyroraptor has to be the one in episode 7. When the one where Kenji, Sammy, and Gia find the Biosyn van was crashed. The Pyroraptor has broken out, and they investigate, and just the way everything in that scene is. The framing of the scene, this sort of slow, almost like horror trope-esque build-up, is so cool. And it almost reminded me of, have you seen or heard of Weird Birds?
No.
So it's like this horror thread, creepypasta thing done by a really talented paleo artist called Arkesukus, about a troodontid stalking a character. It's basically a story told in Twitter threads, and it basically went viral, and a bunch of horror related channels started talking about it. But what I wanted to say is the framing of the Pyroraptor in that episode, especially when it's you see the POV of the kids inside the car, as this thing is like, you only see the silhouette outside, and it's jumping around, it's screeching, you hear it thumping. It's very it's kind of tense because you know there's something dangerous outside, but you can't see it. Everything about that scene is so well handled. And speaking to go back to something I said earlier about bringing bison into the story, acknowledging the novelty of a feathered dinosaur is a really nice way of bringing this new company into the mix that dinosaurs in way that the franchise has never seen before. And I love how they mention it in, I think it's episode 3, where the kids are discussing the single feather in Gia's home. And Darius specifically says that, like, this must be something new. The stuff that we saw, the cloning that we saw in Senegal was basically taking existing clones and making more of them. This is brand new. Someone new is making this. So it just works on a lot of different levels. It's bringing bison into the story. It's doing a lot of cool stuff with a new type of dinosaur. It's everything about it is just really well handled. And for me, the Pyroraptor is the star of season 3, which is actually closer than you might think, because they also do a lot of really nice stuff with the Atrociraptors, especially towards the end. We may talk about that as well. But yeah, and one final thing I'll say is they do this really clever thing of utilizing like individual fallen feathers as a way of building up the dinosaur. And they kind of, I don't usually I like feathered raptors because I find them cool. I don't think any living naturalistic animal inherently looks scary. I think it's all about how it's used, how it's framed, stuff like this. If usually the reason why I like feathered raptors so much is because they look cool and majestic, but the way that they handle just a single feather, like you see, it's the scene where Smoothie is running around the piazza being adorable, and then you just see that the one feather fall to the ground, and it's like a real it's like a real oh god feather to
Yeah.
build it up. They are kind of making feathers scary, just from a certain point of view. So again, when it comes to dealing with things like this, and similar ideas to what we see in the movies, but at least from my perspective, handling them better is something that I think this show especially is really good at. And I think the animators, the writers, the storyboard artists, everyone deserves all the credit.
Yeah, I agree. Everyone involved with this show does an amazing job. And just to kind of go off of what you were saying about the Pyroraptor, uh, I agree, and I really like that it was like building suspense for the entire season. Anytime it was around, you didn't see it a ton, other than I think the episode where it was on the like on the ski slope and it kept diving in the snow and doing that, which was cool to kind of show why it did what it did in Dominion. But most of its screen time, if you even want to call it that, is off the screen, and it's being very suspenseful and mysterious, and kind of like you said, you just see a feather here or there, or you hear it. I think they did an amazing job with the Pyroraptor in the show, and it kind of gave it that little bit of, I don't want to call it horror, because there was nothing really horror about it, but it was the closest to a suspenseful horror type, scenario in the show. Yeah. So I could see little kids being creeped out a little bit by it.
Yeah, but not horror movie scary. Like, it's not a horror show. It's just using horror tropes to like enhance the experience. And I don't want to get my hopes up too much, because animating feathers is very hard. But after what they did with the Pyroraptor, I'm kind of want them to now do Therizinosaurus in the next season, because Therizinosaurus is already really good in Dominion. So I'm stoked to see what the show can do with it.
Yeah, I haven't even begun to speculate and build up stories in my head about what's going to happen in Biosyn Valley. There's a lot they can do, but every time I think about it, it's just more, how are they going to deal with situations where we know what's happening in other parts of this facility? And I doubt they're going to have them run into the main
Yeah.
characters because um, it would just kind of throw off the movie. Now there are a lot of times where like a certain group of the characters are off screen while the other group is on screen. And there is opportunity, excuse me, for crossover. And I would expect they wouldn't get any of the actual actors back to do their voices like they do for all the other big characters. But I think it would be
Well, like,
cool. But we're not here to talk season 4 yet.
I'm glad they managed to get Ken Lachman to actually, because you said a lot of the time they can't get the actual actors, but they managed to do it with Soyona, and I'm really glad they managed to do so. And I guess this is kind of jumping to something else. One of the few, I think, criticisms that I have of season 3 is that I'm still not sure if having Soyona be arrested at the end was a good idea, because at least so far, she's been like the main human antagonist. So now there's this kind of void that needs to be filled. I don't know who's going to be the main antagonist, or the main human antagonist of season 4. I guess it could be Dodson, involved with the Dominion side of the story. So, I mean, depends what they do, but I think if they, I think they should have just kept Santos around somehow. You know, you've already basically made it so that the scene of the last time we see her in the movie, they made it so that that's not when she gets arrested. So she basically gets a new lease on life. But then she kind of gets arrested like a couple of episodes later, and I think it's a little bit of a wasted opportunity. They could have, I think they could have done more with her, and that's like
Yeah,
one of the few criticisms I have of this season.
I think the problem is if they're going to Biosyn Valley, there's really nowhere to shoehorn her into that arc. Because it would make no sense that she's all of a sudden at Biosyn Valley, unless she's like meeting back up with Dodson and be like, you know, you're supposed to help, or you know, that was too close. I need more money, something like that. But then everybody starts thinking along the lines of, like, where was this during the movie, sort of thing. So I'm okay with them arresting her at the end of season 3, just to kind of keep season 4 cleaner. But that's kind of a good segue of what did you think about that ending part of season 3? Basically after where we thought she was getting arrested in Dominion, up until she does really get arrested, like particularly the scene with the handler and what all went down, you know, with that. How do you think they handled that, and what are your thoughts on it?
Well, the actual climax, I think, is, except again, except the one critique where I'm not sure. I'm still not sure if arresting her was their best idea. But other than that, everything else that happened, you know, in the last couple of episodes, I thought was really cool, really like engaging. I love seeing more of Malta, seeing more of the chaos in Malta, seeing them actually resolve the chaos in Malta. Because the way it happens in the movie is like a bunch of dinosaurs get loose, and then, you know, we're off to Biosyn Valley, and I was thinking, what about the loose dinosaurs? So I really like that they sort of tied that story. Uh, Everything that happens with the handler, I really think she's one of the best characters of like the Jurassic World era, and she barely she speaks outside of one time at the very end. Again, speaking of the animators, they managed to get so much emotion, so much character out of this creepy looking lady that barely speaks, and it's the way that she's handled across the entire show, where she really likes dinosaurs more than she likes people, which I can sort of relate, but she takes it to like an extreme degree where that's like the only thing she cares about. She only cares about her pack of her pack of Atrociraptors, which basically treat her as like a member of the pack. It's basically like Owen, but even dialed up to 11. uh, as long as she is able to be with her Atrociraptor, she doesn't really care who she works for, who she has to kill, what is she doing. She doesn't really care. She just wants to hang out with her pack. And the way they use that as like a way of turning her against Santos, and we see that conflict begin to come into the story, where her way of training her is very close and very intimate and very, again, based on, very similar to Owen, is based on mutual respect, versus technology. I'm just gonna point this laser at something and you're gonna attack it because that's what you've been trained to do. It's basic. I think Tom Jurassic mentioned this in when the season first came out. It's kind of like nature versus nurture. So it's very satisfying at the end when she's able to basically snap Red out of for being forced to attack her, and she's like, "No, I'm your pack mate. I raised you. We're close. You don't have to kill me just because this lady tells you." Everything that happens with her, and that the final fight where she unfortunately dies. And I think the idea there, I think, is very cool, where she is so hell bent on getting revenge, getting revenge on Santos, that's one of the few times in her life where she acts, when she shows like strong emotion, and it gets her killed, which is kind of foreshadowed really where earlier in the season when Santos mentions to Brooklyn, in this line of work, emotions get you killed. Emotions are the end of you. And the one time she really allowed herself to be consumed by her desire for revenge, and it got her killed. I think this is really well exemplified with like the one time she speaks, telling Demon the Carnotaurus, "Stop." I think that really shows how desperate she was to save the rest of her pack, because Ghost also dies. I think the idea there is really really solid. It's just that I think because this is also, again, a kid show, they can't physically show her being killed by Demon, and they have to cut away. I think the cutaway makes it a little bit kind of funny. Maybe ruins the moment a little bit for some people. I can see why it might be the case, but I think the actual story behind it is compelling enough that I don't really mind it. I don't really mind the sort of the abrupt, almost comedic cutaway when you just see her whistle fall to the ground. But basically, I think she really is one of the best characters of this entire era. Everything that the show did with her is really stellar, and I think it's really exemplified because by the fact that, especially around when the season came out, I was seeing a ton of fan art of the handler and her raptor pack, and I think that's really cool. The way people have really gravitated and became attached to someone like this. Uh, Again, really well handled on multiple levels. The character design, the animation, everything.
Yeah. I Season 1, I just thought she was weird and super creepy.
Yeah.
Season 3 did a really, really good job of developing her and make us understand her, as a person. And, you do feel bad for her, which she's a great villain, but you don't always get that connection with villains in media where, when she does die at the end, you're like, oh, that's kind of too bad. I think the wrong person got eaten.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Ghost. That's so unfortunate. Poor Ghost survives falling out of an airplane into the water. Just
Just
to,
like,
just to die a little later. Side note with that, I thought that was a really good tying in with the movie where you see Ghost come back on screen and shake all the water off like a dog that got
yeah.
wet. I mean, we don't see Ghost crawling out of the water, but we acknowledge, like, yeah, Ghost was in there, fell out of the plane into the water. And
Yeah, but totally enough to understand how this is all happening.
yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said about, that whole end part. And it it was cool. It was emotional, and I think her death was the closest we've seen to a completely on-screen human death. No, we didn't like see everything, but we saw more than we get with most of the deaths. And I think it was meant to be more impactful, especially with like the whistle dropping, um, sort of thing. Like I know you said it's kind of almost comedic in the way you're looking at it. I look at it different than that, that it's meant to be more like kind of hitting you and, humanizing her. Because even a lot of people are like, "Is she a robot? Is she part raptor? What's her deal? She's just so weird." She's just, like you said, a
Direction.
person that loves these animals, and she would do anything for them, and she did. She made the ultimate sacrifice to try to save the things that she loved.
Yeah, you mentioned on-screen deaths, and I think obviously because they treat dinosaurs different than people, but shout out also to Ghost's death, because we actually see like the Carnotaurus like fully like headbutt into the ground, and it's especially for a show like this, it's pretty brutal, and poor Ghost. She really didn't deserve that, but that's that's dinosaurs.
Yeah, that's I've been saying all along since the show started. It's rated TVY 7, just like Camp Cretaceous was. But I think the writers understood that their audience isn't 7-year-olds. And kids that grew up with Camp Cretaceous are a little bit older now. And even though the show is only, oh, wow, it was 5 years ago now, the start of that show. Holy cow. Anyway, feeling old again. But the kids that grew up with that show are getting a little bit older, but they understood the older Jurassic fans, and they kind of, I think they're pushing the boundaries of what they can do with something, at least in the US, that's rated Y7. And we've already mentioned it before, but big thank you and hats off to all the writers for the incredible job that they've done with this show in making it appealing to kids and adults, and leaving that suspense and wanting to watch more, where it's easy to just kind of watch it and be there. So the way I've seen someone describe the shows compared to Star Wars is Camp Cretaceous is like Rebels, where it's good and it connects a lot to the movies and to the overall story, but overall it feels a little more childish, where Chaos Theory is like the later seasons of the Clone Wars, where the writers figured out kids aren't the primary audience for this, so we need to turn it up a little bit, and we need to, you know, make the writing grow up. And the later seasons of Clone Wars did that, especially like the final arc, the Siege of Mandalore arc in the Clone Wars was fantastic. I think that's better than some of the movies, and adults and children alike can enjoy that for a number of reasons. It was very well animated, it was very well written, and this is not a Star Wars podcast, so I'll stop on my Clone Wars tangent. But just kind of wanted to compare the two and tie them together while we're talking about the show growing up a little bit, and giving props to the writers, the animators, the sound editors, the lighting people, and everybody involved with this show.
Speaking of growing up, and I think it's a nice segue to one of the heartbreaking moments of this season, which is what happens to Sammy and Yaz's relationship. Speaking of mature stuff and growing up with your audience, it's nice that I mean, I say nice, it's heartbreaking, but they acknowledge that sometimes relationships don't always work out. You're especially when they start when the people involved are young, or like children. I think Heidi mentioned it in one of her tweets about the scene, about storyboarding one of the scenes, that they wanted to explore the idea of, are these really the same people they were when they were trapped back on Nublar? How much has changed? How much they've moved on? Are they still willing to? Are they willing to like commit to these old relationships? And how are they willing to deal with all that sort of stuff? I'm sort of breaking. You see the cracks starting to form from the beginning of the season until I think it's episode 5 or 6 when they break up, and it's handled really well, but it's also really heartbreaking. Um, I I do still hope that they get back together in season 4, but I still think what they did with them here, acknowledging that this stuff, it doesn't always end. You don't always live happily ever after. Sometimes tragedy uh, does strike, and especially relationship breakups are another part of life, another part of being queer, especially. So as heartbreaking as it was, I do kind of applaud them for going there, for not being afraid of going there. But despite everything I just said, I do really hope they get back together next season.
Yeah, when thinking about that, I kind of see a parallel to Camp Cretaceous with the relationship trajectory, where, I mentioned this in my last episode, where you kind of got the sense from season one that they were building that relationship. So they took 5 seasons to slow build and let the audience kind of realize, like, okay, this is happening, and it's not a just snap your fingers and it happened thing like Kenji and Brooklyn, which just seemed very forced and fast and out of nowhere. Where Yaz and Sammy was very natural, and it felt very real, even for being kids at the time. And the same thing kind of happened with Chaos Theory, that from early on in season 1, you saw the little bit of disconnect, and you kinda got the sense that things were all, rainbows and flowers and everything, but then they were like, "Oh, okay, they're together, they're happy. It's just they're going through some growing pains, and they're young adults now, and they live separate." But, it started cracking a little more and a little more, and then finally the Brooklyn thing was just, the last straw that kind of separated them. But similar to the slow build of the relationship in Camp Cretaceous, we had the slow, fracturing of the relationship in Chaos Theory. And like you said, it's very heartbreaking. It's sad to see. Probably the best couple in the Jurassic franchise, but I think the writers did a really good job of the way they handled it, and I still think it's the best, most realistic relationship, especially in the show, because like you said, things aren't always, perfect, and people have disagreements, and there are rough patches in relationships, and there's a slow build, and it's the opposite of the other relationships. I already mentioned Kenji and Brooklyn, but even Ben and Gia, and we can talk about them in a minute if you want. Like, that relationship almost feels fake. And I think they're just in the, like, honeymoon phase of the
Yeah,
relationship sort of thing, but it I don't wanna say it feels wrong or, like, that it's not good, but it just feels too too cartoon for me, where I know it is an animated show, but, that's not a realistic relationship other than maybe, like, the first week you're dating someone new and you're both, like, head over heels about somebody, and there are no imperfections, and it's the greatest thing in the world. And that wears off, but also they were just going through some pretty traumatic things, and you would think there would be some sort of, like, disagreement or tension or anything about the stuff they're going through in this, situation, especially with Nona, and they're still just, like, happy and perfect and smiling, and I'm not saying I don't like them as a couple, it's just, I think it could have been handled a little bit different to kinda ground them a little more, but that's just my opinion.
I think reality hasn't hit them yet. I think they're still at the phase where, as you said, it's the honeymoon phase. They'll they'll get to the heartbreak and the sort of the rough patches and everything. The reality of being in a relationship a little bit down the line. I think. I personally, it was like with all the heartbreak going on, because it's not just the Yaz and Sammy thing. The sort of the group kind of breaks apart based around the disagreement of what should be done with Brooklyn. So I think there Ben and Gia were kind of uh, just a little, just that sort of uplifting spark. So not everything is downer all the time. But I definitely think, later, I don't know if we'll see Gia again, but I think, like in universe later on, they will eventually realize that it's not all sunshine and rainbows. And I touched a little bit on the disagreement that it causes within the group, and I kind of want to touch on that a little bit more, because I also really like how they handled that, where you see both sides of the argument. No one is really wrong, because on one hand, the whole thing about pretending to be dead and then dismissing them, choosing to go with Soyona Santos, that's not cool. So I can see why, say, Kenji is coming from, especially after everything that's happened to him. But I also see the perspective of, say, Darius, Yaz, and Ben, who are like, she's still our friend, she needs our help. Both sides feel, I don't know, it feels like a very naturalistic disagreement, and it feels really like it's very compelling drama, and I was really invested in it. And once again, props to both the writers and the actors and everyone for bringing it to life. I found it really compelling drama, and I'm really interested in what's gonna happen in season 4. How they're gonna, when they all do get reunited, how is Kenji gonna feel about Brooklyn? How is Sammy gonna feel about Brooklyn? I thought everything was really nicely handled on that front as well.
Yeah, also very realistic, because things like that would happen. If you take a group of friends in this situation, everybody's not going to be on the same page. We're humans. We all have different thoughts and feelings and views on things. So you're right. They handled it really well. I just used the word realistic, which that's what it is. And I'll piggyback what you said. Give kudos again to the writers, and you mentioned the actors too. They did a really good job. They've been doing a good job with all of the seasons. Very impressed with the emotion that they put into their job and everything. And anytime you see interviews with them or clips of them, you could tell they really love making this show, which is great. It's because it's one thing to just do a job because it's a job, but to actually enjoy it and put everything you have into it, and also be happy with the final product. Like if you've seen any of the videos or interviews and stuff with Kirsten Kelly, like she's over the moon to be Brooklyn, but you could tell she genuinely like really, really loved working on this show. And the couple times I've had conversations, with Darius, his name's not Darius, sorry. But sorry for calling you Darius, but you can tell he like really, really enjoyed it, and he's really proud of. I'm being careful of what I'm saying. He's just, really proud of the show and, how things turn out and stuff like that. So it's great seeing the actors, love the show and love what they did. So hats off to them too for doing a really good job of bringing these characters to life in this animated show, because it's really easy to just read off the page, but they're putting so much heart and emotion into everything they're doing that there's a lot to unpack in season 3 with the tension and the relationships and everything that's going on. That I agree. On top of the writing, the acting for that was really, really good.
I don't know how much time we have left, but I want to touch on 2 other things from season 3. The first one is Smoothie. I don't think we can talk about season 3 and not mention him. What I like about Smoothie is that he's not just cute. I mean, he's adorable, but I really like how he's honestly a pretty integral part of 2 character arcs, with Kenji and also with Nona. With Kenji especially, I don't know where I've heard this from, but it's basically like Smoothie is the first thing Kenji has actually gained since the start of the show, because ever since the beginning, first of all, he broke up with his girlfriend, then the girlfriend, quote unquote, dies. Then his relationship with Darius, deteriorates. Then he loses his dad. Then there's the whole thing with Ben lying to them about he knew Brooklyn was alive but didn't tell them. Like, man's been going through so much, and it was really refreshing for him to finally like gain something. And the way they integrated Smoothie with his character arc, I thought was really well done. But also with Nona, because she starts off the show hating dinosaurs, thinking, which is also a very realistic thing. Like another aspect of what I love about the show is how it's showing how people react to dinosaurs now being, pretty common. Last season we had the Mbalo family, I think. Sorry if I destroyed that pronunciation, but Zaina and her mom, the way they were using the stegosauruses to like protect their farm and being like, these animals aren't our enemies, sort of thing. But then you have Nona, who's kind of the opposite of it and thinks dinosaurs are like this curse that's been unleashed on humanity for, this superstitious angle, which I can totally see something like that happening if we really did have, non-avian dinosaurs running around. She starts off the show hating them, and then through her time with Smoothie, especially, she sees that they're not evil. They're not evil spirits. They're just animals. They didn't ask to be brought back to life. So, which is, it kind of reminds me of people, because people have called Bumpy and Smoothie the baby Yodas of Jurassic. But I think just like in The Mandalorian, in that show as well, Grogu is not just there to be cute, although he is cute. He's not just there to be cute. He's like a part of The Mandalorian's journey, character growth and character arc. And the same thing applies to this show, only in this case, Smoothie is like integral part of not one character's arc, but two character arcs. And I think they did a really cool job with him. He's adorable, and he's also like really well utilized in terms of the heart of the show, how it's integrated into the character stuff, the character side of the story. Once again, really, really, really well handled. And I also really like that we get to spend time with like baby Smoothie. With Bumpy, she kind of became we saw a little bit of her as a hatchling, but then she grew up to, I don't know, big baby. I don't know what to call that. But with Smoothie, we see him be this cute hatchling for so long, and it's every time he's on screen, it's like peak. Everything is perfect.
Yeah, it was a really good addition. I agree with pretty much everything you said about Smoothie and the growth of Kenji and Nona when it comes to that. And you're completely correct that Kenji went through so much and he lost so much. And on that, while we're mentioning the stuff, I think Darren Barnett does such a great job. He was nominated for an award for season 1 for his portrayal of Kenji, and he really really nailed that role. It's kind of sucks they had to replace the actor, especially under the conditions, why Ryan Potter did come back. But Darren's doing a fantastic job. You can tell he puts everything he has into that role. So, it's really cool to see Kenji have something that he feels like he has a purpose again. That's like, I need to protect this, and he's doing everything he can to protect this baby dinosaur, and it's really cool. How do you think the reunion? I guess it's not really a reunion; it'd be a first time meeting between mom and baby goes when they eventually track down Bumpy in Biosyn Valley and introduce Bumpy to the movie. Do you think Bumpy's even going to have any idea, or it's just like, oh, it's a baby dinosaur?
I know. I do think she'll maybe recognize, because she's. I think she'll recognize him as her baby, just because he doesn't look exactly like her, but I think it looks different enough from a regular Ankylosaurus that she'll probably be able to. Also, like maternal instincts, I think she'll probably be able to recognize, this is my baby. And I don't really have any pictures of how that scene would go down, other than it's probably going to be heartbreakingly adorable.
Right. You said you had one more thing you want to talk about, because I've got maybe 10 or so minutes. So go for it.
Oh yeah, the locust. I think it's hard to talk about this season, especially tying into Dominion so much without mentioning the locust. Uh, uh, I thought about how I would phrase this. Probably longer than I should have. But the first, because I remember the season 3 trailer first came out, and it was so jam packed with a lot of this stuff. Especially because with the somewhat lackluster marketing that unfortunately the show has, we really didn't know much about season 3 until we saw the trailer, and it was suddenly like Pyroraptor, Malta, Dachshund, Locust, all these huge revelations. And with the Locust thing especially, I think I felt like a young kid who was like sitting behind the table, and there's a plate in front of me, and there's this delicious looking steak and French fries and everything, but there's also a little bit of a vegetables. There's also some vegetables, and I was like, "Oh, do I have to? Do I have to eat my vegetables?" But I guess so, because if you're gonna tie to the movie, it can't be avoided. I can, however, say it was easily my least hype thing in the season, in the thing I was least excited for. But I actually really like how they integrated them into the story, which is essentially, yeah, this is also going on. This is this is also an ongoing problem, but we're not dealing with them too much. We're focusing on the black market side of the story, which is basically what I wanted them to do. I never wanted to be fully commit to the Locust story, because we already got that in Dominion, and unfortunately I didn't like it very much. um, the way they integrated it here, I thought, was really well done. They did just the appropriate amount, so it's not like they totally ignored one of the major things that's going on when this show is set. But it also didn't distract from what I think to a lot of us appeals about the show, which is essentially the thing that we wanted Dominion to do. This show is doing. The idea of exploring dinosaurs being everywhere, dinosaurs, this kind of genetic power being unleashed, uh, how it's affecting people. What does the world look like? The world building aspect, and also like cool dinosaur scenes. Uh, it's a really nice balance of not ignoring the thing that happens in the movie, but also like not losing track of uh, what their own story is. I think that was once again really well balanced.
Yeah, I 100% agree that they didn't push it on you. They weren't saying like, "This is happening here. This is happening. Make sure you understand this is happening." It was just more of a like, "This is also happening, but that's not the story we're telling in this show." So we just kind of want to keep it in the back of your head that there are other issues going on and there are other diabolical plans in the works in the background. But at least as of season 3, they weren't completely pushing it, because like when they found like the locust in the crate and stuff like that, they easily could have spent time going down that road, and they didn't. And I think we might get some of that in season 4 if they find that room in the lab, or if they uncover something with hexapod allies, or if they overhear a conversation. But I still don't think season 4 is gonna focus too much on it. I think it's gonna stay secondary, and as just a reminder of this happened in the movie. You may not have liked it, but it happened. We're not
Yeah.
gonna pretend it didn't happen, but I don't know,
But
we'll
it
see
also
where season 4 goes with it. No, go ahead.
it also does quite a bit for Bison as well, because it's basically going. The hexapod allies thing wasn't the only thing they were doing. They were also doing this other shady stuff. So it's kind of like fleshing out the company as well, and which is really appreciated, because I I don't know. I doubt we'll see Bison again. Once this show is done. So this season 4 might be the last bit of Bison story Bison involved story we're going to get, and I think this show has really characterized them well. Not characterized them, but has really expanded on everything that they've been doing with the black market, with the assassin dinosaur things. as well as the locusts. So it feels like they feel like maybe more of a threat to the overall story being told across shows and movies and everything.
Yeah, one of the gripes I have with Dominion is it's probably more the lead up to Dominion and the marketing of Dominion is we never got a Biosyn backstory or history or anything about them. They just show up and to the public they're saviors, and behind the scenes they're super corrupt and possibly responsible for the end of humanity. But Chaos Theory is kind of, you know, giving us a little bit about at least how they got there and what they're doing behind the scenes. And I really think season 4 is going to flesh out Biosyn even more, that we kind of get a better understanding of, what was going on, just how evil was Dodgson. I wouldn't be surprised if we get a new Biosyn character. I think there's a possibility of seeing Ramsey. That would be kind of cool, but I don't know. It'll be interesting to see where the Biosyn story takes us in season 4, because obviously that's where we're going. So I don't know.
Said the thing you said about the public seeing them as heroes. One thing I like that season 3 does is we see a little bit of why people see them as heroes, because you have these influential people like, I forget the professor's name, but the professor who was a lecturer at Ben's University basically being forced to say nice things about Biosyn, because this creepy lady with a dinosaur threatened him to not speak out against them. We even get a little bit of clarification of how that sort of positive image came to be, because basically they're going around threatening influential people with killer dinosaurs to say nice things about them and to approve of them. And eventually, if you do it enough times, public opinion is going to be swayed and they're going to see the company as saviors.
Yep. All right, we can chat for another minute or two, but I'm going to end the live stream on YouTube. Do you have anything you want to say to that before I click the end stream button?
Not much. I think we touched on most of the stuff I wanted to talk about. I think the only thing we didn't mention was Barry. It was nice seeing him back. Not I don't really have anything else to say, but yeah, really nice season. I really liked it. I do have to watch the entire show to be able to confidently say if this is my favorite, but it feels like this is my favorite, with everything that it's doing, complementing Dominion, but also telling its own story. It has nice dinosaur set pieces. It has nice character drama. It has heart. It has thrills. It has honestly everything I would want from a Jurassic project.
Very cool. I agree. It was a very good season, and I did have one other thing I wanted your opinion on, but I don't have the time to go into it. So maybe next time we can chat about it or something. It's not a big one, but and if anyone is watching, which currently it shows 0 viewers on YouTube, but anyone that is or was watching, thank you for tuning in to our first ever live stream. I am going to kill the stream for now. All right, that wraps things up for this episode. Thank you so much for everyone for watching and listening. If you're watching this on YouTube and you enjoy the content, please subscribe so you can be notified when we post new episodes. Going to be posting other non-episode content really, really soon. Something really fun I'm going to try out. Thank you once again to Kia. We actually decided to attempt to live stream that conversation. Not really sure how it went. Not really sure what the number count was at any point during it. We didn't plan it. We just kind of clicked the go live button when I was in the interview software. So it was fun. Maybe we'll try to do more in the future and announce it ahead of time. But that wraps things up for this episode. I hope everyone's doing great, and everybody stay safe, stay Jurassic, and have a good one. So long.